Hello, my Bill 5000 Nation. How's everyone doing today? Hopefully, everyone's having a great day. If not, I hope it gets better from here. We are back with a new MrBallen video. This one is titled "The Crime of the Century Was Committed by Nepo Babies." Nepo Babies. Nepo Babies. I don't know what the fucking Nepo Baby is. Alright. I'm excited. I love new MrBallen video day. It's the highlight of the day. So, if you guys are excited as I am, go ahead, turn them lights down low, put on something comfy, cut up with something special. Let's figure out what the hell a Nepo baby is, because I don't know what the hell a Nepo baby is. It's fucking Nepo baby.
Today's story is about a crime so notorious it has been dubbed the crime of the century. But the reason for its notoriety has less to do with the crime itself and more to do with who committed it. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you,
Yes.
please downgrade the Like Button's Netflix account so they're forced to sit through all the unskippable ads. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story. On the evening of Wednesday, May 21st, 1924, a man named Jacob Franks walked up the steps to his mansion, and right as he went to open his door, his butler opened it up, welcomed him inside, and Jacob smiled at the butler and stepped in. Jacob had just spent a long day at his office in Chicago, Illinois, doing a big real estate deal, and now he was just happy to be home with his wife and his 3 kids. Jacob was an incredibly successful business person who had made a name for himself first in the early 1900s when he ran a bank that specialized in giving out these enormous loans to gamblers. But it wasn't until he was named the president of the Rockford Watch Company and he expanded into real estate that he became outrageously wealthy. His fortune in today's dollars would have been around $70 million. But now that Jacob was so well established in the business world in Chicago, he was trying to make a more conscious effort to spend
$70 million? Good God.
more time at home with his wife and kids. And so as soon as he walked past his butler into his mansion, he hung up his hat and his jacket, and he went to find his wife, Flora, to tell her about an idea he had for a trip for that upcoming weekend.
Okay.
But when Jacob found Flora, she was not remotely interested in talking about their weekend plans, because Flora was very worked up about their youngest son, Bobby. Bobby, who was 14 years old, was supposed to come home right after school, but it was now 6 p.m. and he still hadn't shown up, and she had no idea where he was. And Jacob's reaction to this news was just to feel kind of aggravated.
He said, "No, not my Bobby. You can't take my Bobby."
Bobby was generally a really good kid. He was a student at a prestigious boys' school right down the road, and his teacher was convinced that Bobby was the smartest kid in his entire grade. Bobby was a member of the school's debate team and regularly beat the older kids.
Bobbert the Brilliant is what we'll name him.
And Bobby was just a natural leader and very hardworking and kind. But Bobby could also be fairly irresponsible sometimes, specifically in terms of coming home on time. This was not the first time that Bobby had not come home by curfew. So Jacob told Flora, don't worry about it. This is something Bobby does. He likely lost track of time. And as Jacob and Flora are having this discussion, Bobby's older brother came into the room and suggested to his dad, Jacob, that perhaps Bobby was across the street at Richard's house. Richard was Bobby's cousin, playing tennis on their private court. Richard and Bobby were quite close, even though they were 4 years apart. Richard
Man, closest thing I'm getting to a private court is like if I get arrested and the place I go has a tennis court. Lucky.
was 18, Bobby was 14, but they really bonded over tennis, and so that was something they did all the time. And so Jacob said he would go across the street and see if Bobby was there, and he also told his wife, Flora, to just continue to call around town and see if anybody knew where Bobby might be. And so Jacob left his mansion and began walking across the street towards Richard's family's mansion to see if his son was there. Now, this neighborhood that Jacob lived in was one of the most exclusive neighborhoods, really, in the entire country, but definitely within Chicago's city limits. It was called South Kenwood, and basically imagine a street where every house is a huge mansion, and every mansion is home to some business tycoon or famous person, and all the families who lived in this neighborhood
Fucking Hollywood.
had a
Oh
full
shit.
staff of maids and butlers and drivers and fleets of private cars. I mean, these people who lived in South Kenwood were literally the
Hold on. Real photo of a chauffeur. I don't know why that tickled me, but that fucking tickled me.
I mean, these people who lived in South Kenwood were
Real.
literally the richest of the rich. And so Jacob, he gets across the street, he's standing in front of Richard's family's mansion, and he looks around the side and he can see the private tennis court where his son and Richard would always play, but it's totally vacant, and in fact, the house is just totally quiet. No one's home. When Jacob got back to his own home, he found his wife pacing around in the parlor looking really concerned, and so
I'd
Jacob
be-
immediately asked her, what'd you learn? What's going
I'd be nervous. How old did they say he was? Like what, 6? Right? I'm sorry, but if my little kid is gone, no. I don't give a fuck how smart anyone thinks he is.
on? And she would tell Jacob that she had spoken to one of Bobby's friends who told her that Bobby had umpired a baseball game after school and had left to walk back home at around 5 p.m. The school and the baseball field where Bobby would have been was only about 3 blocks away from their home. And now it was 6:30 p.m. So it's been an hour and a half since Bobby had supposedly began his walk home. And so by now he certainly should be here, but of course he wasn't. At this point, Jacob went from feeling aggravated with his son to being concerned for his son's safety, despite the fact that he's thinking, okay, well, my son is likely somewhere in this neighborhood in South Kenwood, one of the safest, richest, best places in the country. He's got to be okay, but I really want to find him. And so Jacob would call one of his very close friends who lived in this neighborhood, who also happened to be a former state senator, and he asked him to come
My God, this all, MrBallen, all of this is sounding like a bunch of privileged fuckers. This is a bunch of privileged fuckers. What the fuck?
over and basically look around the neighborhood for Bobby. When the state senator friend arrived at Jacob's house, the two men left and
My friend, the state senator, stopped by. He informed me everything was going to be A-okay. There's not a thing to worry about. The bullshit. I don't give a fuck.
began walking down the street lined with mansions, making their way towards the school where Bobby supposedly had been umpiring. And when they got there, they saw there was no baseball game happening, and the school was dark and closed for the night. But Jacob and his friend decided that, maybe it was possible that after umpiring this game, when Bobby had begun his walk home, maybe he had taken a detour into the school to get something, and then
Got locked
perhaps
in?
the doors got shut and locked on him. And so Jacob and his friend went to the school.
That would suck. I've always dreamt of being locked out of school and just not able to get into it. But what kind of hellish nightmare would it be to be locked into school all freaking night long? No, sir.
And looked for a way to basically break into the school. And sure enough, they would find an open window, they'd open it up, they would climb inside.
Like they say, where God shuts a door, bust out a window.
And they would search the entire school, but Bobby was not in there. At this point, Jacob was really starting to panic. His friend was trying to calm him down, but Jacob is now thinking, something is terribly wrong with my son. And so the two men actually ran from the school back to Jacob's house, and when they went inside, Jacob immediately called out to his wife to see if maybe she had located Bobby, but when he called Flora's name, there was no response. And so Jacob and his friend, they run inside.
Hey, maybe someone called her, or maybe someone's like, hey, I know where he is. He's down there, and she's like, "I'm gonna go get that little son bitch the whole way home. Oh, I'm gonna put him back where he came from. Oh, I brought him into this world. I'm gonna take him out of it." I bet it could have been one of those. It could have been one of those.
And they make their way towards the parlor, which is where they had last seen Flora before they left. And when they walked in there, they found Flora lying on the ground, totally lifeless, with the phone off the hook right next to her hand. And so Jacob and the senator, they run over and they begin shaking Flora. And suddenly she wakes up with a gasp and she looks up at Jacob and just begins sobbing hysterically. And after Jacob finally calmed her down, she would tell him that after they had left to go to the school, she had received a phone call. And at first, she thought it was Bobby calling to check in. But when she answered it, it wasn't Bobby. It was a man's voice she didn't recognize who told her that Bobby had been kidnapped. He was safe for now, but if they went to police, something terrible.
Not Bobbert! Bobbert, no! Not Bobbert the Brilliant.
Terrible would happen to him. This mystery man also told Flora that they would be in touch soon with more information, and then they hung up. And Flora had been so overwhelmed by what she was told that
Hey, we kidnapped your kid. I don't really know what the hell I want yet. I haven't really thought about. This is as far as my plan went. Didn't think I'd make it this far. But I just wanted to call and let you know he ain't coming home for supper tonight. So go ahead and just put out placemats for 2. Oh, wait a minute. You got an extra kid. I didn't get him. Put it out for 3. The 4th will not be there. Why?
she had fainted, and that was why they found her on the ground. That night, Jacob, Flora, and the state senator friend stayed up late going over, what they should do. Of course, they wanted to go to police, but this felt like a credible threat that
Something about this is sounding awfully shifty, awfully shady, awfully just not fucking right. Anyone else, raise your hand if you agree. I don't know how many of y'all's raising your hand, but I'm hoping it's more than just me.
Bobby could be harmed if they did that. And so they just went back and forth over how to handle this horrible situation. But by 2 a.m., they had made a decision. The state senator had some close friends and connections in the police department, and so they decided that they would go talk to the police, but they would swear them to secrecy so the kidnapper or kidnappers wouldn't know the police were investigating. And so, a few hours later, when the police department opened up, Jacob and the state senator friend went to the police. They spoke to the highest ranking officer who was sworn to secrecy, and then that morning,
This all just sounds weird, man. Like, I don't know what I'm not understanding or grasping or comprehending in my melon dome, but why are you going after like the cop that is like, oh, we need the best of the best. Now let's swear him to secrecy. Like, what is this shit? Like some skull and bones type bullshit?
police would begin a quiet investigation into Bobby's kidnapping. At the same time this investigation was beginning, on the morning of
Shouldn't all investigations be relatively quiet? I mean, you really don't want people knowing what all you know. But I'm sure people are gonna find out, oh, there's a kid that's missing, potentially dead or potentially kidnapped. Like, is the whole family, like, the dad's done broke into the school looking for a little son bitch. Like, they've done called everywhere. Everyone knows what the fuck's going on. You ain't hiding this shit. You're not hiding it at all. It's too late.
May 22nd, 1924, a man named Morton D. Ballard drove through downtown Chicago in a luxury
Like Ballard sausages?
car known as a Willis Knight. He pulled this luxury car into a parking lot right next to a rental car company, and after parking the car, Morton got out, he went inside of the shop, and he handed the keys over to the clerk behind the desk. The clerk would ask Morton, how did it go with your rental car? And Morton would say, oh, it was perfect, went totally fine. After that, Morton thanked the clerk.
It was a dream. It was someone else's nightmare, but it was a dream for me. You know, in the brochure it says you can fit all the you need to take you can fit like 3 bodies in that son bitch. I had 3 bodies, a tackle box, 2 shovels in case one broke, 2 things of rope, some duct tape, the metal kind and the regular duct tape. Oh god. Oh, fuck me. Uh, back. Oh, that was back in the day too. You know them vehicles so.
He turned around and walked outside where another luxury car was waiting for him, being driven by his good friend Lewis Mason. And once Morton had climbed inside, the two men smiled and drove off and disappeared into traffic. That same morning, Jacob and Flora received a letter from the kidnapper or kidnappers demanding $10,000 in small unmarked bills, and if they gave this money over, they would get their son back. And immediately, Jacob went to the bank and got the money, but before he could actually deliver the money to the kidnappers at the location they had specified in this letter, the police, who were quietly investigating, discovered a clue that would break the case wide open. It would take over a week to unravel this bizarre clue, but it all started to come together when the police brought in Morton D. Ballard and Lewis Mason for questioning. Here is the shocking story that detectives were finally able to piece together about what happened to Bobby Franks. On May 7th, 1924, so 2
Hold on now, MrBallen. Is this where everything gets all fuckered in the boot? You know you gotta warn me before you go around just boot scooting it, alright? You gotta calm her down. You gotta calm her down. You gotta let us prepare. There's so much going on in this story. It's craziness. I'm loving it. Like, I know I've been very quiet, but there's just a lot of this. It's like so much going on. I'm loving.
weeks before Bobby went missing, Morton D. Ballard walked into a hotel in Chicago called the Morrison and rented room 1031. He would tell the front desk that he wanted them to hold his mail for him, and over the next couple of days, Morton would come in and he would get his mail from the front desk, but he didn't appear to ever actually go up to his room. Finally, a suspicious maid at the Morrison Hotel, who had been going into room 1031 every day to clean it, only to discover that Morton was not in there and the room was totally untouched and clean already, she went in one morning and saw Morton was not in there, and she would actually just open up one of Morton's suitcases that he had left inside. And instead of the suitcase containing clothes or toiletries, it just contained a bunch of random library books. As it happened, after this maid found this...
This is the weirdest story ever, MrBallen. Maybe he's just one of those people that, likes the finer things in life, wants to buy the finer things in life, but has a general fear of everything. Wants to experience it all without experience it all. It could happen. It could happen. All right, don't.
strange suitcase full of books, Morton stopped coming to the hotel. He stopped getting his mail, he did not claim his luggage, and he didn't pay the bill. He just kind of vanished. On May 9th, so just a couple of days after Morton first booked that room at the Morrison Hotel, Morton also opened a bank account in Chicago. He also made his first appearance at that car rental company where he asked for the Willis Knight car. The rental company would not just let anybody take a Willis Knight car. You needed a reference to show that...
Damn, bro, look at it though. That's some pimpin' shit, bro. I'd support it. Just cruising down the line, be like, "Hey, baby, what you doing?" And they'd be like, "Walking to the store, what you doing?" "I'm a driving." "Bro, I'm walking faster than you driving." "Hey, don't you judge how fast my car goes. It's got that 1 horsepower, bro. You don't even know."
The rental company would not just let anybody take a Willis Knight car. You needed a reference to show that you were someone who could pay for this type of vehicle. And so Morton's friend, Lewis Mason, would give him that reference and allow him to rent the Willis Knight car. About a week and a half later, on May 21st,
I mean, that makes sense. You don't want a bunch of poor people that can't afford to driving and getting, it all dirty and having to take $100 bills out there and clean it off after dirty people have sat in it because they're poor. I mean, nobody wants that. Man, what kind of. I'm sure it's probably like that today on some of the fancier cars. Like, I'm sure there's. You can't just jump in a Lambo and just test drive it. Like, I don't mean like, the ones that everyone. I mean like the rarer of the rare type shit. I'm sure you gotta have some kind of proof that you got monies. That makes sense.
so the day
Makes sense.
Bobby went missing, Morton and Lewis were driving around South Kenwood in their Willis Knight car when they spotted Bobby by himself walking down the road. Now, Lewis recognized Bobby, and he knew that Bobby was an incredible tennis player, and Lewis had a question for Bobby about a particular tennis racket. And so Lewis, who was in the front seat of the car, told Morton, who was driving, to pull over so Lewis could talk to Bobby. And so Morton pulled over, Lewis rolled his window down, he called over to Bobby, Bobby came over, and before long, Lewis and Bobby were talking about this tennis racket. And then when that conversation naturally wrapped up, Lewis offered Bobby a ride the rest of the way home, because that was where Bobby was walking to when they stopped him. And so Lewis climbed into the back seat, Morton stayed in the driver's seat, and Bobby climbed inside and sat in the front seat. And then once those two were situated, Morton pulled away from the curb and began driving towards Bobby's house. And as they were driving to Bobby's house, Bobby just kind of continued talking about this tennis racket because that was the thing they were talking about. And as he was mid-sentence, Lewis from the back seat reached into his pocket, pulled out a chisel, and then lunged forward and began smashing Bobby in the back of the head over and over again with this chisel. And as Bobby is screaming in pain and trying to protect himself, Lewis lunges forward, grabs Bobby, drags him into the back seat, and then holds him down, pulls a rag out of his pocket, and jams it into Bobby's throat. And then he closes Bobby's mouth and holds it shut until Bobby goes still. After that, Lewis kind of grimaced at all of Bobby's blood.
Why? Why? Did he not like the conversation about the tennis? What did he like a different? Was he more of a Spalding type person?
All over him, and he kind of pushed Bobby down onto the floorboards below, and then Lewis calmly climbed back into the front seat and sat down. And meanwhile, Morton has not remotely reacted to what's just happened. This is just business as usual. Morton and Lewis did not go to Bobby's house, but instead drove towards Indiana. And on their drive to Indiana, they would stop at a roadside restaurant and eat hot dogs and root beers with their car parked right near this restaurant with Bobby's body just totally exposed laying out on the floorboards of the back seat.
These people don't give two fucks. What? I don't understand why and what the point. MrBallen, my brain. Why?
Morton and Lewis would eventually get into Indiana, and they would head to this particular forest that Morton was familiar with because he was a bird watcher and often came out here. And when they got to this forest, they parked in this clearing, they got out, they checked on Bobby and confirmed that he was dead. So they pulled him out, they stripped all of his clothes off of him, they rolled him up in a rug, and then they dragged him over to this drainage pipe that sat underneath some railroad tracks in this swampy area, and they jammed him inside of it. And then they got back in their car, they drove back to Chicago, at which point Morton called Bobby's mother, Flora, and informed her that her son was kidnapped but alive, even though he wasn't, and don't call the police, we'll be in touch.
Fuck is wrong with these two? They put the why? For the love of God, someone please, just why? MrBallen, tell me. I need to know why.
Soon. That night, Morton and Lewis would burn all of the clothes they had stripped off of Bobby. They would also clean the interior of their Willis Knight rental car, and then they would play a game of cards together before going to bed. The next day, May 22nd, so the same day that police began their quiet investigation into Bobby's kidnapping, Morton and Lewis would send that letter to Jacob and Flora demanding $10,000 for the safe return of Bobby. But unfortunately, before Lewis and Morton could claim their ransom money, Bobby's body was discovered. In fact, that day he was discovered. A walker was cutting through the woods in Indiana and saw Bobby in the pipe. And so when Morton and Lewis realized that, the jig is up,
Man, and just think if like that person would have been walking through there, or if he just wasn't paying attention, or if it's someone who, doesn't go looking, hey, I wonder what's in that pipe, that happens. Not everyone's like that. Some people just don't really care. I've walked past that 1,000 times. I'm not looking in it. It could have been forever before anyone found that body. They might have actually got away with it too in a situation like that. That's some craziness.
Family's never going to pay for their son because he's dead. They just returned their Willis Knight rental car and went back to their normal lives as if nothing had ever happened. But unbeknownst to him, Morton had accidentally dropped his eyeglasses right next to Bobby's body when they dumped him in the woods in Indiana. And Morton's eyeglasses were very unique. In fact, there was only one store in the world that sold this particular kind of eyeglasses. And so when detectives got the call about Bobby's body being found, they would also find these glasses. And that was the big clue, because these glasses led detectives to the store where they were sold.
It was Harry Potter.
And the owner of the store was able to say that, yep, those particular glasses were sold to Morton. And when detectives went to Morton, Morton immediately pointed the finger at Lewis, saying that Morton didn't do anything to Bobby.
He's a wizard, Harry.
Lewis did. But about a week later, on May 31st, both Morton and Lewis would confess to police that they murdered Bobby. But far more shocking than what Morton and Lewis had done was who they were, because Morton and Lewis were not their real names. The two men who killed Bobby Franks were rich kids just like Bobby who lived in South Kenwood. They created two fake names, Morton D. Ballard and Lewis Mason, and then they booked room 1031 at the Morrison Hotel. Now, they had no intention of actually staying at this hotel, and so they just left that suitcase full of books inside of the room to make it appear like they were staying there. But in reality, the only reason they booked that room is they needed a physical mailing address that was connected to their fake personas. And so after booking this room, they began sending mail to Morton D. Ballard and Lewis Mason at the Morrison Hotel, room 1031. And then after collecting that mail, which served as a sort of proof of legal name and address, they were able to open a bank account in Chicago. They dumped some money into that, and then again, they used their proof of legal name and address to rent that Willis Knight car, and then used money from their phony bank account to pay for it. And then once they had their luxury car, it was time to go kill. In reality, Morton was actually a 19-year-old prodigy named Nathan Leopold. He spoke 5 languages, he had already graduated from college, and he was a nationally respected ornithologist, which is someone who studies birds. Nathan's IQ was so high, it literally couldn't be measured. His father was the president of a very successful steamship company, and Nathan...
Oh my god, so he... fucking silver spoon in the mouth fucking genius. Are you serious?
was planning to attend Harvard University in the fall to get yet another college degree. And Lewis was actually 18-year-old Richard Loeb, who was Bobby's cousin and one of his best friends. Bobby and Richard played tennis together all the time in Richard's private court, which is where Bobby's father went first to go looking for his son. Like Nathan, Richard was also a genius. He was the youngest person ever to have graduated from the University of Michigan. He graduated at 17 years old. And to celebrate the occasion, Richard's father, who in today's dollars was worth about $175 million, he was a retired vice president for the major retail store Sears. He bought Richard a custom golf course. He built him his own golf course. That was his graduation present. And at the time of Bobby's murder,
I would love for someone to build me a golf course. Yeah, I'd be happy if someone built me a birdhouse, honestly. I'm not picky.
Richard was actually enrolled at the University of Chicago's law school studying to become a lawyer. Nathan and Richard would very proudly tell investigators that they didn't kill Bobby to get money out of his parents. Nathan and Richard were fabulously wealthy. The money meant nothing. Instead, they had come up with this scheme and killed Bobby because of their belief in the philosopher Nietzsche's concept of supermen. Men whose superiority allows them to rise above all ordinary rules, ethics, and laws. Basically, Nathan and Richard believed they were so much better than everybody else in the world that if they wanted to kill someone, they should be able to. And Bobby seemed like a pretty easy target. After Nathan and Richard confessed,
Are you fucking kidding me? We are smarter than anyone we know. We should be allowed to kill people. I'm rich and smart and I'm going to murder whoever I want. I'm going after the weakest one first. That's some bullshit. Oh, baby boy, you're going to get blue in the blue when you get to prison.
they were put under arrest, but a chauffeur was allowed to come to the police station and drop off silk pajamas for them to wear in custody, and instead of being held in a cell, they were allowed to stay in a hotel. But ultimately, they both were sentenced to life in prison. Bobby's family never recovered from his murder, and his father, Jacob, would die just 4 years after his son died.
That's awful. That whole family destroyed because someone thought they was smart. Well, two people knew they were smarter than a lot of other people, and they was like, I can do whatever the hell I want, whenever the hell I want. So they took this poor kid's life and destroyed a whole family. And they actually was letting them wear silk pajamas and stay at hotels. That's some bull.
As for Nathan, he would be murdered in prison in 1936 by another inmate. And as for Richard, he would serve his time and get paroled and then die of natural causes in 1971. Today, the murder of Bobby Franks is often referred to as the crime of the century. So that's going to do it. If you got something out of today's episode and you haven't done this already, please.
Heck yeah. Those two fools are dead. They're dead. One got beat to death in prison. The other one did his time, served it, did his crime, did his time, got out. More power to him. And he dead too. That to me is a happy ending. That not for the. No matter how I say it's going to sound stupid, so I'm just going. To me, that's a happy ending. Not the family with the kid that died. That's a horrible, tragic, awful ending. But the fact that they actually spent life in prison. I mean, yeah, I know one of them's life got cut short because he was beat to death, but that's what the little gets. You know what I mean? Oh, rich, smart people. You gotta love it. I really, I enjoyed today's story. Like it was a lot. It was chaotic, a little intense, a little bit of everywhere, but yet just focused. I really enjoyed today's story. I really do. Mr. Ballen's got this gift. He's got this way with words. It just comes up and smacks you in your eardrum. Like I love it. All right. I really enjoyed today's story. If you guys enjoyed today's story as much as I did, please go down there and hit that thumbs up. If you're a fan of the spooky, scary, strange, deranged, think about subscribing. And as always, be good to one another. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye. And the kid just thought, man, some friends want to ask me about something I know something about. This is so cool. And then just come up and just start out of nowhere. Man, no. Fuck that. That if you're gonna kill someone, man, have the balls to take my life to my face. Don't be a little pussy and do it from behind my back. You know what I mean?